Here for the first time in the Adams Center when the Lady Grizz won the national champion, or not the national, I wish. Okay, so my dream life is kind of in here. When they won the Big Sky Championship, something happened that has never happened before, and it was so cool. Except that the coach, Selvig, he said it kind of scared him because all of a sudden there was a booming and sparkling of things up above, and down came confetti like crazy. And it was just so exciting and kind of satisfying. It was like a real celebration instead of like the buzzer going off and everybody jumping up and down. It was like this confetti was saying, yes, we are celebrating. I thought that was great. Finally, the Adams Center got with it. But the author, N.T. Wright, says we ought to get with it a little bit more when it comes to celebrating Easter. Because, he says, Easter is really a celebration. And we too often have 40 years of Lent, or 40 days of Lent. I have no idea where my head is. 40 days of Lent. We went 40 years. Well, you know, in a way, that's where 40 days comes from, is the 40 years that the Israelites were out in the wilderness. But that's another sermon. So, 40 days of Lent with one day of celebration. He says, that just isn't right. We should have more. It should go longer. And since he's a bishop in the Anglican Church over in England, he thinks, well, we should have, when they have their morning prayers, because you can go to church every morning at the Anglican Church and have morning prayers. He says, we should have champagne after morning prayers. Or maybe he says, before. We should be throwing our hats up into the air. We should be celebrating and recognizing that something major happened when God raised Jesus from the dead. And it's so major that it is still going on until we get to Revelation 21 when it's all done and we have the new heaven and the new earth. God is already, ever since Jesus, that first fruit, came back from the dead, God is renewing all things, even you and me. So I asked myself, I wonder why it is that it isn't that long a celebration for us. Why is it that we don't really think about celebrating like that? And I think that there's a couple reasons. And one of the reasons is that so often all that Easter is whittled down to is that it's our guarantee a pie in the sky when we die, by and by. You know, we got our ticket to the blissful life in heaven. What more do we need? But when Jesus was raised from the dead, God said so much more than that. Yes, maybe that's there. Yes, it's there. But there's so much bigger and broader that happened when God raised Jesus from the dead. As that same author, N.T. Wright, puts it, that when God raised Jesus from the dead, he is promising that there is coming a day when he will get rid of all decay, all corruption, all death, and the whole cosmos, not just the world, but the whole cosmos, will be filled with God's power and God's glory. I mean, this is something absolutely amazing. That God is about renewing, bringing new life, and taking this good creation that he made, even the humankind, and making them all that he intended them to be originally. Now, I think the other reason that it was hard for us to celebrate, like maybe Easter should be celebrated, is because we still watch TV, or we read our Twitters, and we look at the news on our internet, or in our newspaper. I guess newspapers are going out quickly. But when we look at all that, we say, how could God possibly be renewing things? How is it that God is getting rid of this decay and corruption in our world when it seems that's all around us? And we get discouraged. We lose heart. We lose hope. The one thing that we can have at Easter, but all the days after that. Because we forget that even when we can't see him, Jesus is alive and present in our midst. And we know something about him. We know that he wants to make all things new. In fact, he's got a plan. And that plan is that you and I will come to a time and a place where there will be no more tears, no more death, no more corruption. That's what he wants. And what's more, he's made this incredible, loving, so loving that we can't get it probably, offer. He says, and to the thirsty, not to the perfect, not to the people that are really working hard at it, not to the best disciples in every congregation. No, to the thirsty, I will give the water of life. Now, how hard is it to be thirsty? That's all we need, is to be thirsty. And he says, I'll give you the water of life. And what's more, it's a gift. You don't even have to pay for it. Now, that says a lot about us, that we couldn't, if we wanted, to pay for it. We couldn't earn it if we wanted. But it says so much about God, doesn't it? That he invites us to come because we're thirsty. That he wants to give us this water of life, to give it to us. What a God. And the same God had the power and the love that brought Jesus Christ from the dead, and who is continuing to bring about his new heaven and his new earth. And all the old things will be passing away. And we know that's true because we know that in time and in space, Jesus was raised from the dead. So again, I wonder, why don't we celebrate it? Or maybe the other question is, maybe we need to learn how to celebrate more. Maybe we need to figure out ways. And as I've already probably indicated to those of you that don't know me, I'm a big basketball fan. Women first, but you know, the men are okay. And I was watching ESPN a couple weeks ago, and I saw a program on 30/30 about Jimmy Valvano. And some of you may have heard of him. They called him Jimmy V. He died of cancer in '93, I think it was. But Jimmy Valvano was hired in 1980 to be the coach at North Carolina State. Now, you might not be able to tell it from his name, but this nice southern university hired this gregarious, loud, outgoing Italian from Queens, New York. And if that sounds funny, it was. And there wasn't a person in town, or really, even at that time, the Duke guy, Coach K, I can't say his last name, Coach K knew him. And even he thought, this guy's not going to make it. How is this loudmouth Italian going to make it in a nice southern town, in a nice southern university? Well, Coach V, as they called him, came into North Carolina State, and he said to those young men, we are going to get the national championship. We are going to get the NCAA championship. And they all like, I don't think so. They were not a powerhouse. No one would have expected that of him. But one of the things he did to make sure that could happen was every week they would come to practice. And one practice a week, they had no ball, did no passing, no dribbling, no shooting. no guarding. Do you know what they did? Once a week, they practiced cutting down the nets. Now, some of you may not know, but you cut down the nets whenever you won a big game, especially a championship game. And so he had them practice every week how to celebrate when they won the national championship. Well, in 1983, and it's kind of known by so many people, but in 1983, they made an improbable sweep through the NCAA tournament, winning at the last minute in every one of their games, until they finally got to the championship game. And then everybody knew. I love it. Yeah, it was good. What a shot. I love it. Oh, that is wonderful. So they get to their championship game, and they were playing, I don't remember the name of the school, that's bad. But this was called the Slamma Jamma something. This had Hakeem Olajuwon on it, this team, and Clyde Drexel. And those are pretty big names still today, right? These guys were going to go on to the NBA, and everybody knew it. There was nobody they thought would go on from the North Carolina State. They were done for. But you know, they hadn't practiced celebrating for nothing because they won that game. I heard Hakeem Olajuwon on that program even talk about that. They went in sure they would win this other team. No one could beat. They were unbeatable. Not. And I think that's one of the other things that's like when we get to Easter, it is absolutely crazy that God would raise someone from the dead and start off this renewal. Went to a customer, sweetie. Oh, you start right now. That's okay. But he, as he prepared them to celebrate, we need to be prepared because we have something even more improbable, but true. And we know it. They just were hoping they would win, but we know it, that that victory is coming, that God, who has promised that there will be a new heaven and a new earth, who has said, yes, I invite you, if you're thirsty, to come to the water of life. We know we have that. So I was thinking, how could we celebrate? How could we go into our Mondays, not just our Sundays, because every Sunday is kind of a little Easter, right? That's why the Christian church finally decided to worship on Easter, or on Sunday, because it was the day of resurrection. So I came up with a couple ideas, but I'm sure many of you are more creative than I am. You'll come up with a couple more. And one is an idea that I got actually at Western National Leadership Training some years ago. But on Monday morning, when you get into your shower, and you're starting to think of everything you've got to do that day, and all your agenda is running around, just stop for a second. And think about baptism. That as the water's coming down on you, that you are being baptized. And remember your vows to be a faithful disciple. And remember what is said as we come and we are put in water, or we sprinkled with water, that you have died with Christ, but you have also been risen with him. One way that maybe you could remind yourselves. Now, for some of you that live with more than one person than yourself, like I do, if you live with some other people, maybe every Monday, what you do when you get up in the morning, the first thing you say to each other is, the Lord is risen. And the other would say, he's risen indeed. And it just, on Monday morning, I wonder if that would help us just a little bit as we go into that day remembering that Jesus is alive and that he is out and about renewing, bringing life to you and to me, that you might even begin to recognize some of those things he's doing around you as you start looking for this risen Christ right around you. I think it's really be exciting for us to find a way to celebrate. You know, maybe some confetti, maybe throwing your hats, except the only hat I saw was the Duke hat. So maybe we don't wear hats as much as they do in England. You know, some way, it would be fun to find some ways to recognize and celebrate that Jesus is in our midst. Just once a week at least. Figure out how to cut down those nets and practice the celebration.